goes nothing. It's This Week in Charles Bronson, the highly uncalled for news and pop culture show that revolves around one weirdo and his community's obsession with the late great action star. And today I am joined by the shock and awe from Arkansas, Bradley Crane, and our one of our listeners and first time guest and co-host of the show, Mr. John C. from out there you're out there in Los Angeles, California, is that right?
Yeah, Northern California now.
Northern California, where the girls are warm. I think that's
Yeah,
what they say. That's in a song, right?
sure.
Who cares? But anyway, it's December 16th, 1977, and we're talking about Telefon, starring Lee Remick, Tyne Daly, and of course Charles Bronson, and of course Donald Pleasance too. And this is a great America and Russia collide in a Cold War epic of with spies and assassins, and Bronson plays a Russian KGB agent with no Russian accent. John C., you are a fairly new member to the This Week in Charles Bronson crew, but you've been around for a little bit because it's taken a while to finally get you on here. We kind of we do this by the seat of our pants, and I'm a dad of a 9-year old, and Brad's out there whining and dining his lovely wife. So but you have a story before we jump into this movie about actually having a run-in with Charles Bronson. Is that correct?
That is correct. And he was very gracious. It was unexpected. I was with a couple of pals, and after work, we would meet up at this small pitch and putt 9-hole, 3-part public course. And I was pretty sure I saw Charles Bronson practicing his putting over to the side. And it was just the three of us. And I said, I'm going to go ask him if he wants to play with us. And I couldn't get over. Here is this famous movie star, because this is, I'm going to say it's 1986. And Bronson was the #1 international box office draw for 3 years, since the late 70s, and actually 74, but then up to 86. So he had been on the cover of magazines. He was just so very well known and wealthy. And I'm going, what is he doing at this little dumpy place? But I didn't really want to do anything other than tell him how much I really loved his movies, because as a kid, I couldn't drive, of course, but I would take the bus up to this movie theater, on a Saturday, and I would sit and I would watch the movie through a couple of times because I didn't have anywhere else to be. And it was perfect for a young person, a young guy like me, and now a not so young guy. They're still perfect because I'm just trying to get through this life. And Charles Bronson always has the quick-witted thing to say and a throat punch, and he handles the situation, and I just love to see it. So he declined. He wouldn't even make eye contact. He could see me approach, and he just kept practicing his putting. And he goes, "I'm waiting for someone." And so I just nod, and I go, I had the scorecard, and I said, "Would you mind autographing my scorecard?" And he sighs and he takes it and he looks at it. He goes, "There's no score on this." And I said, "You know what? I really didn't want to do anything other. I don't even want your autograph. I just wanted to tell you how much I really enjoy your work. I'm so happy I got the chance to do it." And he kind of sighed in relief. I'm going to guess now that he thought I was going to try to give him a script, maybe ask for a part. But I just was so happy to be able to tell him how much his movies meant to me. And he laughed and he just kind of nodded. And then I moved away, and just a brief touch and go. You don't want to outstay your welcome. And so then I played with my buddies, and we were on the course, and I'm going, this is crazy. The guy, and eventually what happened is his stepson, Jason, showed up, and Jason was with a friend of his. There's more to it, but what actually happened was Charles Bronson was really paying attention to his stepson.
Yeah.
He was making sure his stepson was doing well, because it was at a time where he was not doing so well.
Right.
So he was just being a father figure. And
Hmm.
I am still to this day so impressed that he would take time out of his day and go do this and spend time at this public course. And so I asked if he wanted to play through, if his groups wanted to play through, and he declined. And I didn't understand that either. Why wouldn't you want to go ahead and play through instead of behind these duffers? And so they we just kept on playing, and but now I think that he wanted to teach his stepson, you don't take advantage of people, and everybody's a regular person. He was being humble, and so we finish up our business, and I'm out in the parking lot, and I see Charles Bronson at his car, and I say, "Hey, uh, have a great day, Mr. Bronson." And I had told him that I used to take the number 8 bus up to Santa Monica to see his movies. And so he looks over and he waves at me and he goes, "Hey, number 8 bus." And I thought it was just great. And so that's my little story.
That's a great story. I can't even imagine meeting
Oh, it was
Charles
wonderful.
Bronson. I often think to myself, would I have wanted to meet him? Because as I like, like people always say, don't meet your heroes, but I've been lucky. I met quite a few people that I admire, and most of them were pretty cool, except for like the guys from the band Dinosaur Jr. But they had just come off stage and they were probably tired, and I was like 15 and all hyped. But yeah, I always think to myself, would I have liked to have met Charles Bronson, or like if he would have broke my heart and been like, "Get away, kid," I would have been like, "Oh man."
No,
But
that's
you know what? One
the
time I was in LA, and I think I told this on another episode, I think. And here comes my son. Yes, son. Uh, all right, buddy. I'll come check it in a minute, okay? And Lemmy from Motorhead was in the Rainbow Room, and I went over and I tapped him on the back, and he didn't turn around. And I read later, years later, I read that never to bother him while he was playing his machine. And he was playing his video machine when I was in there. And after years later, I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? It was his personal time, him doing his personal thing. Like, it's all right that Lemmy from Motorhead didn't give me the time of day. I still love him. So, but
right.
let's talk about Telefon. Written by Peter Hyams and Sterling Silliphant, who we'll get into later, and directed by Don Siegel, who we'll also get into later. One thing I don't usually start off by telling my opinion of the movie, but like I want to say two kind of not bad things, but kind of not good things about the movie, and one good thing. And the bad things are there's was room for more action with Charles Bronson. I think it could have been more exciting. Uh, at times the movie was slow and kind of boring, but the third thing is I loved it. I loved the movie. It's like comfort food, and I love the time period 1977. I was born in 75. So I don't remember 1977, but I remember the world looking the way it did in this movie. Because in 1982 or whatever my first memories were, 1980, people were still driving cars from the mid 70s, late 70s. And Days In and Howard Johnson's and all that were still around. And I love the look and the feel of this movie. I think it could have been more exciting, but I really like this movie, and I hadn't seen it in years, and I watched it like pretty much twice. I kept popping it on at work, and like so they're probably if they ever look at my work computer, they'll be like, "Why does he keep watching this movie called Telefon?" But it opens up with the MGM lion, which is always cool. And then we see the cool computer printout, because which was really high tech in the late 70s. Go across the screen, and then it says Moscow, January 10th. And then there's that guy's eyes, and it's a Siegel film there in the corner, which I don't usually go through the credits like that, but I like the way that looked. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The very beginning of the film.
Yes.
And then I guess they're KGB agents, and I have written down here great music because I love the music when they show up at that building and the car pulls up and the lieutenant's like now, and there's after those little schoolgirls leave. Okay, I guess he waits till they come out, and I says something like he says I want them alive, and the KGB guys at the general. Strelsky, played by Patrick McGee, sends them in there, and they're looking for the Del Chimsky character, played by Donald Pleasance, which at this point we don't really know what the story is with him yet, and why the KGB is looking for him. But he's gone, and his mom is there, and his mom is played by a Finnish actress by the name of Ansa Ikonen. My book says her name is Ansa Konen, my Films of Charles Bronson book, but when I looked her up on the internet, her name was Ansa Ikonen, and she's only in Finnish films besides this. This is like the only American film that I see she's in, and she tells them that he's gone away, and they goes back and they tell the general, that he's gone. And the general says something like, if that's true, God help us. And then the one guy says, God.
What?
And then what happens next, Brad, I'm sorry, I almost called you Danny. We show up in Denver, January 17th. And
Well, first,
basically, go ahead.
I'd like to just take a moment just to give a reflection on what John had said about Bronson before we continue on with the movie. And I just wanted to share that I think that that was probably a good time to meet Charles Bronson in
Mhm.
the mid 90s. I think
Mid
everything I've
80s.
read is that Bronson had, kind of mellowed some during that time. We
He was
in our
66 at the
prior
time.
conversations, it seems like, in the 90s that was probably a pretty good time to meet
Well, he
Bronson.
said 1986.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1986.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Bronson was 66 years old, so I agree. I take your
mhm.
point. He had mellowed and he had enjoyed some success.
I think you called him at a good time
Yeah,
too, that he was meeting his son, and and you were a young man yourself at the time. So from what we've learned from people, he seemed to like younger people.
right. Well, that's a great story, John. Thank you for sharing that with us because we've heard from Lindsay and we've heard some from some others, some personal stories about Bronson, but I don't know that I've ever heard of a story of someone who actually met Bronson
He's the
and he
first. He's the
and he
first on
treated
our
him.
program. Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure, right? And I just wanted to just reach out and tell him you're great. And it
Hmm.
was just that simple.
Right.
Yeah, you're the first person on our program. We do have a member who told me a really great story about meeting him in Canada. He was either filming one of the Family of Cops movies or he was filming Death Wish 5. I think it was one of the Family of Cops movies because I think he was on the side of the road actually filming that interview that you can find on the internet, like for like a TV station or something. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The
Where
one
he's
with Lee Marvin.
no, no, not that one. I'm talking about like the mid to late 90s when he was doing those Family of Cops movies. The
Right.
guy has a really cool story, and he messed around. He kind of joked with the guy, kind of like he did with you. It's a very similar story. He was weary when the guy approached. I want to tell the story so bad because it's a good story, but I'm hopefully he'll hear this and he'll reach back out to me because I can't remember who the hell it was.
Right.
But it was a good story. It was very similar to yours. You know what? To hell with it. I'm
Right.
just going to tell it. He went to walking up to Charles Bronson, and Charles Bronson said to him, like he had something in his hand for him to sign. And Charles Bronson said, "Are you going to give me money?" And yeah. And then he said he asked him for his autograph, and he said he was very kind and gave him the autograph. But I like that he messed with him a little bit, like made a joke with him. You know what I mean?
Right.
It sounded kind of like a similar type of situation, whereas like he was a little weary. He said he looked a little weary when he was approaching, like worried that this is going to be somebody bothering me too much, But
Right. But Eric, that really goes to the point. Remember when we interviewed Jan Gann Boyd and how
yes,
she would talk about how if someone would come up to Bronson and say, "Would you sign something for me?" He might
Mhm.
joke with them a little bit, but he would always do it.
Yeah,
What he really didn't like is when people were being sneaky.
yeah.
And
I need
John,
to
what
find
you
out.
did.
Yeah, I need to find out who this person was so they can tell the story correctly. I believe there was more to it, but God, I can't even imagine. I don't know
Yeah.
what I would do if I saw Charles Bronson.
But John, what you did was just so respectful, and I think that at that point in his, that's the kind of the person Bronson was. He appreciated people that were respectful of him and his time and who he was, and weren't just trying to profit somehow off of him. And I think that's what your story illustrates.
What a
Yeah.
nice thing to say. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, it's a really great story. And and it's also interesting to me too, like how Bronson is such a contradiction of himself. Like there's that story in um uh we interviewed his family. Oh my God. Richard Fleischer's book, where Charles Bronson, the person says these guys come over to the table, and this is like 19, around the time of this movie here or earlier, because Majestic was in 74, right? 74,
Yes,
75,
that's correct.
74.
74.
And yeah, because it came out around the time of his Death Wish. And the guy came over and said something like they were in the area golfing, and Bronson made a joke about golf and said, "Oh, I got a golf course in my backyard." And the guy goes, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I let my dog shit in it," or something like that. So Fleischer said he was really rude to them, and but maybe that was him being silly and making being funny. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
but I mean, he
You don't
was.
want to interrupt somebody's dinner either. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I remember, I'm going to tell this story. We don't have to go into every goddamn detail of this movie. It's pretty much the same thing over and over in the movie, basically. But uh I saw Johnny Ramone once at this like horror convention, and I had met him when I was a kid. I had met them all. I stepped onto their van, which was probably the craziest thing to do. I stepped onto their van, and it was a van because they were cheap. And Marky and Johnny and CJ all shook my hands and smiled, and they were very friendly. And they didn't really talk; they just made noises like they make these like Ramones noises. And but I had heard stories about him being a nightmare, and we saw him with his friends shopping for like horror movie. He collected horror movie and Elvis stuff and 50s memorabilia. And my one friend, she was like, "Oh, it's Johnny Ramone." I was like, "Let's leave him alone." You know what I mean? Like there he is. Like we see him. Like let's just leave him alone because I don't want to ruin that lucky moment that I had. Because I didn't know till after the fact. Like, oh wow, they were nice to me. I hear all these horror stories about how rude they can be to people. And meanwhile, it turns out that they all did not get along for years in that little tiny van. So that's probably maybe they just came off of a really great show. I mean, I thought it was a great show. So, but I know that's like almost up there with Charles Bronson for me, the Ramones. So,
Well, you
but the
mentioned that I just wanted to, like I said, give John his thanks for what he did, but then you mentioned the movie itself and how we
hmm
had moved on from the opening where they'd gone in and were trying to arrest Chimsky, and then we would gone over to Denver, Colorado. I
yeah,
just thought that was an interesting section because the first person we meet in the movie is Harry Bascom,
Harry
who was
Bascom.
played
Yep.
by John Mitchum,
hmm
who, he's the first person that we see that's this human time bomb that's triggered by a poem by Robert Frost. And I just love that John Mitchum is that person for one, because he's Robert Mitchum's brother, but
hmm
then two, his history with Don Siegel being an important part of the Dirty Harry franchise and that type of thing. So it
Yeah.
was really nice seeing John Mitchum playing that first human time bomb.
Yes, and I love how Donald Pleasant's character with Dolchimsky, first name Nikolai. I like how he calls the people up, and he says the whole poem. The woods. Well, he asks for their name. He says, "Is Harry Bascom there?" He says, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." And then he says, "Remember," and then he says their Russian name. "Remember, Nikolai, miles to go before I sleep." And I have written down Nikolai and Nicholas with a question mark because I felt like he said both, but it was weird. But anyway, um, and I like that when I was kind of young, I didn't realize that like, oh, these people are Russian that were so deeply hypnotized undercover that they thought they were Americans. Like he thought he was Harry Bascom, and just this poem unleashed this killing machine in them. And he goes and he gets his box. They all had a box for some reason, and he goes and he blows up was it like a it wasn't an Air Force base, but it was some kind of air base, right?
It was a military base, and
Mhm.
it had been out of service for 10 years. So
Right.
it still has guards, but that was part of the plot too, is why are these explosions happening for bases that are no longer in use?
Right.
That's right.
And I kind of didn't. I know like they kind of try to explain that in the movie. But for a guy who has a movie podcast, like sometimes I struggle with like what the hell's going on? Like why is he blowing up this place? And I love that Dolchimsky was always there watching what happened. Like at some point I was like, why doesn't he just do it himself if he's going to be there? But you know, because nowadays they would have just checked a video camera and said, "Who's that guy up on the hill?" While watching this all go down.
Right. You make a good point, John, because in essence, there's this situation in the movie where they're illustrating where we are now compared to where we were 20 years ago. And
Yes.
so it's like it's like now Chimsky's he's kind of a holdover from the old days. And
He
so
didn't get his promotion. This is
that's
why
right.
he's gone off the reservation.
That's right. And so everything that he's kind of triggering is kind of like he wants to go back to the old. He doesn't like this idea of like the United States and Russia trying to get along. He
Right.
likes the old days of the Cold War.
Hmm.
And so
Yes.
he that's why everything's kind of old fashioned with him. It's like this base isn't even important anymore, or this type of explosive is not even relevant anymore. Hadn't been used
Yeah.
for years, but
That's a good point. I never thought of it like that.
Yes.
And you know, you mentioned the Cold War. So I was two when this movie came out. I was probably 13 or 14 when I saw it. And I had this conversation with Brad a couple weeks ago. I loved Cold War era stuff when I was a kid. But if you asked me what the Cold War was when I was 12 or 13, I wouldn't be able to tell you what that meant. I just loved Russian people in Russian outfits and spies and shit like that. I love that.
right.
And you know, it says
I
on the
was
screen,
17. I was
yeah,
17 when this movie came out, and
mhm,
the Cold War was a really scary thing. I remember being
yeah,
in grade school where they would have us duck and cover, and
hmm,
the idea would be to turn away from the windows because there would be, I was in Los Angeles, there would be a nuclear explosion and all the glass and everything would come in. So you needed to just protect your neck and turn
hmm,
away from the glass so it wouldn't cut you. And it was a real fear as a school child, and
hmm.
even in high school when I saw this movie in 77, I was 17, and detente was a real thing. And there were quite a few people, even my own family, that did not want to have detente with the US and Russia coming together. And that's from the US side. People are saying, don't trust them. You can't trust them because it had been just 10 years since Nikita Khrushchev banged his shoe
Hmm.
at the UN and was promising to sell the United States the rope with which he would hang us.
Right.
And so I mean, this was like we're all familiar with kayfabe and smack talk, but at the time it seemed very like a real possibility,
Yeah.
a nuclear war. So I could understand Delchimsky as well. Things were ending. He was just a clerk, as Time Daily found out later, and he
Hmm.
he was hoping for a promotion. He wanted people to recognize his great work.
And you know what's funny about what you're saying is me being born in 75.
Uh-huh.
So in the 80s, there the threat of what you're talking about really wasn't as great, but film and television kept that fear alive with like things like Red Dawn, and I mean the Russians were the bad guys in every action movie. So like I
Yeah,
don't think we didn't have the fear you had, but it was there was still like a holdover. Like I mean there was still a lot. I mean Red Dawn terrified me as a kid. The thought of them like parachuting in while you're in whatever.
Right.
sure.
But yeah, it's funny that you say that because I can't like my dad talks about the same thing. Like
My
doing that
mother
at the
has
end of
said the
school.
same thing about how it felt like a real threat back. She was
Hmm.
born in 51. And so she has told me about when she was growing up how they actually were scared of the Cold War. They were scared
Yeah.
of what could happen. So that hits home to me when you share how you felt, John, because I've heard those stories from my own mother.
Sure.
So then it says
You
7 days later. So Del Chimsky must have went on quite a trip because the next killing's not for 7 days. Um,
He
and
heads to
now
Florida, Apalachicola.
that's right. He goes to Florida, Apalachicola. That's right. And before
Fun
he
to
goes,
say.
is that before or after Apalachicola that we meet Tyne Daly in the very sexy Tyne Daly in Langley, Virginia?
It's before.
Right.
Hmm.
And so that guy has a helicopter business, and his wife is really, boy, she's really coming down hard on him. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I think he was happy to get that call to realize he was a suicide bomber. You know what I mean? What did she say? You get to fly around playing God in your whirlybird. I
I
had it
love
written down, but
Whirly
I lost it.
Bird.
Yeah,
I
whirlybird.
love Whirly Bird.
Me too. Yeah, I love that.
I was coming back from I guess I had been to I'm thinking Disney World one year, and I was just wanting to take the pretty drive home because I live in
Hmm.
Arkansas, and
Right.
I was just kind of wanting to go along the coast there of Florida, and I was kind of checking out the path, and we went. I knew if I went through there, I would go through Apalachicola because it's
Hmm.
right on the coast there, and so because of the film Telefon, because I've had this. This is my VHS of Telefon that I've had. I don't know.
Hmm.
This is probably 35, 40 years old right here,
Yeah.
whenever I bought it.
I don't own it. It's great.
But I went to Apalachicola and I stopped at Burger King and it got me a burger and stuff. And it's all because of Telefon.
You didn't receive any phone calls while you were there, did you?
No, no, didn't get anything. It just I just wanted to feel like I was, you know how I've gone to different Bronson
Hmm.
locations and stuff. And the truth of the matter is they did not film in Apalachicola. That's not actually filmed there, but I felt a kinship with Bronson by stopping at a Burger King in Apalachicola on my way home from Disney World.
One time I was in New York City, drunk as a skunk with my buddies. I mean, trashed. And my one buddy wanted to see Strawberry Fields. It's like John Lennon's, I don't know. It's like a tribute to John Lennon. Who cares? And it's in Central Park. And I'm so trashed, I don't realize I'm in Central Park. I go, holy shit, this is Death Wish. We're in Death Wish. And they're all like trying to, I don't know, mourn John Lennon or something. And then these cops come up and they're like, have you guys been drinking? I was like, fuck yeah, we've been drinking. And then the cop like he starts laughing and I guess like and I'm like, isn't this where they filmed Death Wish? And the cop goes, no, I think that was Chicago. I go, Chicago? What kind of fucking cop are you? You don't know where they filmed Death Wish with Charles Bronson? Yelling at him. Oh my God. And he did not arrest me because
Oh gosh.
I guess yeah. I guess I was harmless. I don't know. But so the second killing takes place. Of course, and I had that written down. I lost that paper. What was that guy's real name? His real Russian name. He had a good one too. He had a cool one. I
I don't
lost I lost the paper here somehow.
I don't remember what his Russian. I just think him as
Yeah.
Carl Hassler flying his whirly bird.
Carl Hassler, Brian, that whirly bird. You get to play God all day, flying around in your whirly bird. So then it says, then the cool like letters come across the screen again. Langley, Virginia.
Right.
And now, when I was a kid, Tyne Daly, even Lee Remick, who's in this movie, those were old ladies when I was a kid. She was from Cagney and Lacey. Old ladies. Oh my God, is Tyne Daly sexy in this? As Dorothy Putterman. And now I feel like Dorothy Putterman, the nerdy, sexy, nerdy computer analyst. I feel like she's a predecessor to like you ever watch the shows like NCIS or CSI or JAG? They all have that like goth girl or nerd girl that like all the nerd guys are in love with. Danny, you're younger. Do you know what I'm talking about? I go to
Oh yeah,
Danny for that.
it's a staple of the genre at this
It's
point.
a staple, and I
Right.
feel like she's the original almost. Almost, she's almost the original because she's nerdy. She knows how to use the computer, and she makes the men look stupid. I love that. like she's almost a
Sustainable.
feminist character in a time, in 1977. What do you think
Yeah,
of her,
she's
John?
attainable.
Yeah, yes, exactly,
Yeah.
right.
And then one thing about this script is I noticed that the women get the jokes. They were the ones who got the laugh lines, and the guys would
Yes.
then react with a deadpan or not get it.
I
Or
was thinking the same thing before we started. I was like, one thing this movie doesn't have, Bronson doesn't have any great lines. And I was like, you know what? Tyne Daly has all the great lines. And even like, I think Lee Remick has a couple good
Lee
ones.
Remick had a couple of jokes in there. Lee Remick was 47 when this was made, and
Oh man,
Bronson
see,
was
she was an
56.
old woman. That's too old
Yeah,
for me.
well,
I'm
Bronson
41.
was 56.
Right.
Yes, I know. And he was looking his age in this movie, but not old, but looking his age. And I liked that. I liked when I kind of like this and Love and Bullets. I kind of like the way he looked in those movies, where he
Yeah.
kind of
Because
looked.
this Love and Bullets, this movie fit right in between White Buffalo and Love and Bullets. And
Hmm.
as far as Tyne Daly goes, I really, really like her character in this movie. She had been in The Enforcer with Clint Eastwood a couple years earlier,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
then she comes in and does this role, and she's so good in the amount of time she has. She really does a great job of illustrating. You mentioned a nerdy character or what have you, but it's so funny when you think about this computer expert in
Hmm.
1977.
Yeah, yeah.
A
And it's
computer in
all DOS. It's all
'77.
like she's
Yeah,
on there and she's like she makes the men look like fools because she's the one who figures out like this is no coincidence that 24 top brass communists have died in freak accidents.
that's
And
right.
the men act like they kind of blow her off and kind of act like they knew it, but they really didn't.
Right.
And of course, the next page is my Carl Hassler page. I found it. And what I have written down here is Dalchimsky's wig after the helicopter explodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Donald Pleasance decided to be there when all these bombs went off and everything. I guess he didn't want to do it himself because that would mean killing himself. But he's just there at all of them. And
Yeah.
this one, he decides to wear. Why this one and not the other ones?
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
just
noted that as well as with his new wig. I thought that was
Mhm.
an interesting,
and he
interesting.
and he does such a 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 50s movie trope. He goes to the local TV store to watch it on the news.
Turn them all on. Turn all the
Right.
TVs on so I can
Turn
watch
them
the
all on,
news.
yeah. And then when he walks out, sir, did you want a remote? Like they, like
So
they.
now we're 20 minutes into the movie,
Hmm.
and now we meet Charles Bronson.
Exactly. I have that written down.
20
Actually,
minutes.
I have it written down 21 minutes, but
Okay,
and that's
okay.
Leningrad on the 24th of January. Today's the 25th. We met Charles Bronson yesterday. Well, and what's he doing? The coolest thing, he's coaching kids hockey.
Have, have,
I never pictured Bronson like as a sports guy, but he plays a good Russian even without the
right.
accent.
Eric, I know you're doing some coaching now. John, have you ever coached any like kids sports or anything like that?
Not for a very long time, but that was an interesting moment there. He was showing that he had charisma and that he could get children to listen to him. That is a hard thing that
Yeah.
I'm sure you know. And Danny, if I don't know if that's in your future, but it's hard to
Oh,
get
I've been
kids
a
to
coach.
listen.
What did you coach?
I coached football for a while.
Oh wow. Yeah,
Awesome.
Daddy is engaged to get married, so I'm gonna be like one of those like the in-laws usually do, and I'm gonna bother them to make me an uncle. Hey, you guys working on that yet? They that creepy when people
You're
do that. That's
trying?
kind
You're
of
trying?
yeah. It's a Chris Dolan that
Yeah.
got a bit like that. But what's funny is I don't really know a lot about sports, but I love coaching my son. And today his lip was bleeding on the basketball court. I'm like, and I just all I know is wrestling, so I start yelling, "Would Sabu come off the court because he's bleeding?" And he's like, "Who the fuck is Sabu?" He's like, "I'm cursing so much this episode."
Well, I
I'm
coached I coached Hank, I coached my son and my daughter both in basically all of their sports up until through their grade school years until they got to their high school, junior high coaching. And it's so enjoyable. But and so to me, that was a really special way to introduce. I'm not a hockey person
Yeah.
down in Arkansas. I don't know anything about hockey. I tried to ice skate a couple years ago down in Dallas at like the Galleria around Christmas. It was horrible. I don't
Oh
even like
man.
to think about it. It was a terrible experience, but
I
I
used to
still
love ice
appreciate
hockey.
it.
Yeah, I appreciate hockey. I don't know it like I used to. I followed it a lot when I was young, but I couldn't tell you what the hell they're doing now. I don't know who the people are or anything. But
Well, can I
so
point out, can I just point out one thing that first of all, we know Bronson can skate because Brad's Brad's second favorite movie,
right,
Twinkie,
Twinkie Lola. Yeah.
Bronson
You
skates.
better hush that up, bro, John.
Now, John, why is that his second favorite? I thought that was his favorite.
Well, all the rest are tied.
I was
There
just
we
thinking the
go.
other day. I was just thinking the other day how we still have to do that, and I just can't bring myself to put somebody through that. I'm gonna put Megan through it. I'm gonna put Dan's fiance through it. Make her watch
That's what
Lola.
you said in one of our prior episodes. Dan, you're going to bring Dan and his fiance in for that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Danny and his fiance are two of my favorite, very funny comedians in Philadelphia. And Danny, you can check him out on Feel Feelings podcast, and you can check him out on Blanketing Covers. Do you do another one or just those two?
that's the two. Yeah.
That's the two. And she
hey,
does one
Danny,
called Real Chills, which is one of my favorites. I just haven't listened in a while because
Yeah, they're
I
back
just
out regular.
yeah.
This is back as the co-host.
It's like a
Danny.
ghost story. Well, I was on there once, but go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say, Danny. I don't know. I know you've listened to our Lindsay Ireland episode where I really bared my soul. I'm really surprised I haven't been brought onto your feelings podcast after that.
Yeah,
I
he's got
mean,
feelings, this guy, believe it or not.
Serious
I will
feelings.
absolutely have you on if you want to.
Okay. You
Most of
just
his
you
feelings are
let me
hernia
know.
related. I mean, hemorrhoid related.
You let me know when you're ready, Danny, and I'll be there.
Yeah, I'll reach out definitely.
I was on a deep episode. It was deep.
Yeah,
Did you listen to mine, Brad?
what was yours? I'll have to go look. I forget what.
I'll go listen to
I was
yours,
about my
Eric.
brother
Yeah,
dying.
I'll go listen to yours, buddy.
Yeah, I talked about my brother dying. I'm talking
Oh
about
goodness, I need to listen. I
talking
need to
about
listen to that.
oh, I forget what the actual
Your
emotion
feeling was
was.
floored.
Floored, yes, yes, that's what it was.
It's from May 8th, 2023. That helps anybody go find it.
So
I'll
now
go check it out.
the next scene is the scene that influenced Naked Gun. John C., you want to talk us through that scene?
No, I just want to circle back and finish up with the Bronson's coaching.
Oh,
He was
yes.
describing to these young players, and through the Socratic method, he was asking them questions, and their answers wouldn't always be right, but he never
Mhm.
made them feel bad or feel like they've
Right.
done
He
something
had a
wrong.
good line. There was a good line during that part. What does he say to them when he's coaching them?
He,
Keep your eyes.
he's
Kind
trying to
of
get them to understand what's to anticipate what your
Mhm.
opponent is going to do. And
Yeah.
they go through these questions, and the young boys are, yes, they're taking a shot at it, which is great. And it's great that they feel free to try to answer to Charles Bronson. But Charles Bronson basically tells them all at the end of it is that you don't want to watch what your opponent does, because then there won't be any anticipation. You'll be too late by the time you get to the puck. So you've got to figure out what is going to happen, what is the goal for the puck. And that's what Charles Bronson, his Colonel Gregory Borsov, has come to the U.S. to figure out what's going on with Dalchimsky. So that
Right.
was really great foreshadowing there. And that was Peter Hyams wrote that part of the script. That was interesting.
And Peter
But
Hyams directed my two favorite and the only Jean-Claude Van Damme movies I saw in the theater, Time Cop and Sudden Death. I love. Speaking of hockey, must be a hockey
Oh
guy.
yeah, sudden death. Yeah.
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 How do you like
yes,
that?
sir.
So the next scene is the scene that influenced the scene in Naked Gun, where they're telling Bronson about Telefon, and he says to him the general or whatever he says to him, who is the most secret agent? One who doesn't even know he's an agent. And then they call that guy in to bring tea. And what did they say to him? Cleopatra says there will be snow from the west or something like that.
Right.
And then he like pulls out that gun and and like, well, I'm doing. Not everybody watches this show, but
Right.
he
That was a
clicked it.
moment.
Yeah, he clicks it. There's blanks and or nothing in it. Click, 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 and then he sticks it in his mouth to kill himself. And that's when you see that they how they hypnotize these people. And Bronson was like, "Oh, what the holy shit? What the hell's going on?"
Let me ask you this question. Did anybody else besides me see the Naked Gun in the movie theater?
Oh yes, definitely.
I did not see it in the movie theater, but I saw it because you had told me about, you had described that there was a similarity, a similar scene.
Hmm.
And I was unaware of it because I hadn't
Oh
seen
wow, yeah, that was a big deal for me to see that in the theater because I
Oh,
I remember watching. Um,
You
there
were a
was a
police squad
TV
fan?
show called Police Squad that me
uh-huh.
and my dad loved and laughed our asses off. Which was like a few years before the movie, which was and the show didn't do good. So the fact that they made a movie out of it was great.
Right.
Yes.
I've been watching it lately. It is so funny.
It
Oh,
is so good.
it is,
So
it
good.
is.
Well, when I watched the movie at the theater, I think so it came out, I believe, with 88, I believe, that's a Naked Game came out. So I was 14 years old, 15 years old at the oldest. And I remember watching the movie thinking, is there any other human being in this theater or anywhere else
Hmm.
that knows this is from the movie Telefon?
Right,
I just, is there any other human being besides me? And so meeting Eric and meeting people later in life that also realized it was
right.
coming from Telefon has been so fun for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, and when you watch that scene, it's almost like frame for frame. It's almost like just like it.
They present the scene in Naked Gun almost, when that guy you mentioned the words Cleopatra says there will be snow from the west, and he pulls out the gun and starts shooting. In
Hmm.
the movie Telefon, Charles Bronson gets up real quick, and you could tell he's like, okay, I don't know. Well, of course, Naked Gun always goes a little overboard, but the same thing, the guy like gets up in his seat like he's scared to death,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah,
whole thing. It was so fun seeing that, and I'll never forget that experience in the movie theater because I was there with like a group of friends from we were like on a school trip, and I just remember I looked around and thought there's nobody here besides me that realizes this from a Charles Bronson movie.
right. And then they tell him about his American contact, who we know is going to be Lee Remick. And they mention that he's got a photographic memory. Now, Lee Remick, her character, she wasn't Russian, correct?
And
She
she
was
was American
American
CIA
contact.
agent.
CIA, that's right. Okay. And
He picked him up in Canada and they drove across the border. And the border guard asked
that's
him,
right.
um, what's your nationality and your birth city? And so Lee Remick is American, and Charles Bronson answers, or his character answers, American from Pennsylvania, which is a
That's
little
right.
inside, because of course he is from Pennsylvania.
That's correct. That was really
So are
cool.
you, Eric? Yeah.
And
And
then
he,
she picks him up. She picks him up at the airport, and she's just very energetic. And he says something to her like, "Don't be so damn cheerful" or something like that.
yeah.
Do me a
Well,
favor,
he
don't be so
compliments his
damn
looks
cheerful.
and tells him you could have done worse.
Right, right, yeah,
He gets through the moment. He doesn't compliment her, but he doesn't take away the fact that he finds her attractive. So that's the start of that moment, and it's a lot bigger. It plays a lot bigger in the book by
mhm.
Walter Wager.
I
The
do own
social,
that book somewhere. I have that somewhere.
yeah, and their characters are much younger. So
Hmm.
I really take your point what you said about the ages
Right.
of these characters.
And before we get on to her picking him up, like I don't have I only can do like an hour 15 minutes because of my life. But we're gonna have to bounce around a little bit. But we do see Tyne Daly again, and she makes those men kind of look stupid again. And because she recognizes this N09 like explosive that they act like, oh yeah, yeah, it's oh N09, sure, like they didn't know what it was. and they say something to her, something degrading or something, and she says, "It's precisely that kind of attitude that led to the downfall of the Hittite Empire." I love that line.
I do too. They just all are like, I
They're
remember
like,
the guy
"What?"
goes like, what? What she
Uh-huh.
talking about?
And I felt like her character was like in her own movie. Like I really wanted more of her. Maybe even you know how sometimes when like characters exist in a different frame in a movie and they never cross paths, it almost feels like two different movies going on, kind of. Like I feel like she should have crossed paths with them somehow. I don't know why. I just really do.
He was
And they would take the after the airport. They take a drive to the motel. And Bronson wants her to drive through to another motel in case they're getting followed. And I love the old cars that they're in. I even love the sound on the radio.
I just
Uh,
want one piece of trivia, Eric.
hmm
I love, and I know I've recommended to you, and I know you love the movie as well after I recommend it to you, but there's Don Siegel directed a movie called Charlie Varick.
Yeah.
Okay. And the actress, we mentioned earlier, Carl Hassler, you remember how his wife was giving him a hard time about you're going to go off
hmm
in your whirly bird? Well,
Yeah.
that actress was in Charlie Varick.
Was
And in
she?
the, and in the movie, Charlie Varick, uh, her and Charlie had the same.
Jacqueline Scott.
Yeah, Jacqueline Scott's her name. And they had the same wedding bands that Charles Bronson and Lee Remick use in Telefon. Remember how in the movie Telefon, Bronson and Lee Remick show their wedding bands. They're like,
Yes.
those wedding bands are the same wedding bands that Charlie Varick with Walter Matthau and Jacqueline Scott use in that movie, which was directed by Don Siegel as
Oh
well.
my God. That's a good piece of trivia.
It's a
And I,
really that I thought that was a really cool piece of trivia about this movie.
and if anybody has not seen that, like that's a great act. That's such a good movie. I wish this was up there. I love this. I do love this movie, but I just feel like it was lacking a little bit, like it could have used some more action. But they go to the motel. Uh she's being a little sneaky. She's going through his briefcase and stuff. He catches her, and basically tells her, all you're gonna find in there is, you know, your dossier and all this and that. So,
the sexual history.
oh, her sexual history, yeah.
And
That's a good
she
point.
just she got the laugh line, and that she goes tacky.
Tacky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the murder of the priest, who is really a Russian agent, deep undercover, that doesn't even know it. Father Stuart Diller. And there's an Irish woman in that, Mrs. Maloney. I liked her.
Right.
I liked her character.
Eric, one thing I wanted to point out about this movie and just some notes I had made, and I know we've shared on our page and that type of thing of how much Quentin Tarantino appreciated Charles Bronson.
Hmm
You, I think Telefon is a good way of illustrating that because if y'all have seen the movie Death Proof, which was the second, you had the double feature
Yeah,
Grindhouse with where he eventually released the full version, but the movie Death Proof uses the same poem.
really. I never seen the
Have you
movie.
not?
I
Well,
really never have.
the movie Telephone, of course, it sets off human time bombs, but in Death Proof, they've put out that if you will come quote this same poem, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep," you'll get a lap dance, okay, from the
Oh my God.
specific girl. And but Quentin Tarantino, of course, he's famous for borrowing from movies he loves
Yes. hmm
or movies he appreciates. Well, he borrowed not only Naked Gun specifically, but Tarantino borrowed this plot device for his movie Death Proof as well.
I'm gonna have to check that out. There's a lot of movies that I haven't seen. You'd be
Right.
surprised. It's kind of my claim to fame. Like I know every Bronson movie. I know every like bad '80s horror B movie, but if something's really popular, there's a good chance I never seen it.
Have
And
you
I'm
seen
trying
that?
I'm trying to remedy that. I've been watching Woody Allen. I never got into him. I've been watching Martin Scorsese, Godfather, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Have you seen that, John? Have you seen Death Proof?
Yes, and you and I talked about it, and I remember you saying I showed the clip, and on YouTube, yeah, you've put it up on the group, and so have I. And if you look at a clip from Death Proof, you'll see Kurt Russell is making that very quote. And whenever he does, somebody's about to die. So it's great. And Quentin Tarantino had made a point that Telefon is a kind of a quirky premise. And I just wanted to point this out. The premise is quirky, and when you hypnotize somebody, there are two things. You cannot make anybody do anything they don't want to do, but you can make somebody do something they do want to do. For instance, if you want to hypnotize somebody to eat a whole chocolate cake, that is possible. But what had actually happened in 1953, there was a government program, a U.S. government program that started, and it was only started because the CIA learned that the Russians had been experimenting with things like ESP, hypnotism, to get people to do the very thing that was being shown in Telefon. It wasn't true. It was a hoax that the Russians pulled on the CIA and made the CIA look foolish. But the U.S. government wound up spending tens of millions of dollars on this program trying to hypnotize people. So the premise is hokey and it is quirky, but it's based on a real thing and a conflict between the United States and Russia.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't
That's
realize
very
that.
interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that. And because we can't cover every goddamn thing, I have to cover that we see Tyne Daly rubbing her legs together with her stockings. That was great. That was really sexy. And
Yeah.
then, of course,
I
there.
made a note she's too in love with her computer at that point.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Well, she
very.
made her computer fall in love back with her.
It
Mhm.
sounds like it.
It even
Yeah.
talked to her. It was
Yeah.
very, very war games. Very, very. There was, that kind of stuff was still going on in like the '80s movies. But then they so Santa Monica, the 28th of January, they go to the hospital because the priest is still alive, and Bronson needs him dead. He needs to be dead for the sake of this mission, and a nurse could get in there and do it. Well, where's she going to get a nurse uniform? She asks Barbara, his CIA contact, and they both look up, and what just happens to be there in the hospital? A nurse's uniform store.
Hmm.
So he
Married to a
gets,
beautiful nurse, I appreciate this whole plot line.
yeah, a beautiful nurse who just had a birthday,
Just had
and
a birthday.
yeah, and he goes and he calls the nurse on call. He calls her from a telephone. A lot of telephones in this movie. Is this movie pronounced telephone or telephone? Who cares? Um,
Do you know the nurse that he called is a lady named Carmen Zapata?
Yes.
And she's a very famous, like a Mexican actress. It's interesting. I'm not going to go into all of it here, and if anybody wants to share more, I'm just going to say look into her. She's got a star on the Walk of Fame. In Telephone,
wow.
she had
The
a
name sounds
small
familiar.
I know her
small
from Via
role.
Alegre, a
Go.
PBS show, Via Alegre, a children's show. I
Mhm.
was a kid and she was on this Via Alegre. Um,
It's funny you said that because when you said the name, the first thing that came to my head was a children's show. But then I thought maybe I'm thinking of the woman in Death Wish that was on Sesame Place.
Right.
Hmm. I'm gonna look into her later because that is like what I really wanted to find. I love finding every episode something like that. And I'll be honest with you, I've been so busy with work and with being a dad that I said, oh, let me look up Dalchimsky's mom. And when I looked her up, every movie was Finnish, and I was like, oh, I guess that's
Eric,
not
I'm
gonna
gonna
be it.
say I will tell you this, and John, you can agree with me. I think you agree with me. Eric, you will appreciate this woman's career. I didn't realize it till today when I was
Mm,
doing my own preparation, the career this lady
yeah,
had and the influence she had. Like I said, she has her own star on the Walk of Fame, and it's
yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, that's the kind of person, like if they have a book, I want to read that. Like I'm more interested in that than like somebody real, like super well known.
That's right.
I just want to note that the other writer of this film was Sterling Silliphant, and he was an Academy Award winner for his screenplay of Heat in the Night. He worked on television shows such as Naked City and Perry Mason. Speaking of television shows, if you were home that night, you might watch a TV movie starring Cicely Tyson called Wilma, or you might watch Maude's Christmas surprise episode or the Bob Hope Christmas special, because we were very close to Christmas when this aired. And being that I'm very into music and rock and roll and punk rock, 1977, even though punk rock came out in like it's questionable when it came out, but 1977 is known as a really big year for punk. The Ramones' Rocket to Russia album came out, their third, but many think their best album. Sex Pistols premiere, Nevermind the Bollocks, and the Damned's premiere, self-titled Damned. So a good year for punk rock. So we kill the priest. They kill the priest, and because there just so happens to be a uniform. And then it's January 28th, I believe. And that was another kill. At this point, I was like, all right, I had enough. Like I've really felt like it needed to like we got the point of the kills. And who the was that was that Cherie North?
Yes. You
Yes.
have gotten to Marie Wheels, played by
Hmm.
Sherry North at this point.
She's
And
55 in this part.
Really? And
And
and we
three
know her
years
from
ago in
Breakout.
Breakout, she was 53 wearing those Daisy Dukes.
Wow. That's something else.
I feel like we have a missed opportunity here in a way, though, because literally she had been in Breakout. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I don't mind admitting this. I think that she was so beautiful in Breakout. I really
Hmm.
do.
Yes.
Yes, so do I.
It was 2 years later that she's in this, and they put her in that big old thick
Yeah.
house coat for
And
this
it
kid.
was a throwaway role. It was nothing.
Yes. And she's wearing slippers and and a house coat.
Hmm.
And her storyline went for 8 minutes and 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm
she's
thinking,
carving on a rock and
I,
everything. Like, what the hell's going
well,
on?
to Brad's point is a missed opportunity. I think, first of all, they wanted to keep the movie rated PG
Hmm.
because she is so sexy. She was a studio project brought in to replace Marilyn
Marilyn
Monroe
Monroe,
because
that's right.
Marilyn Monroe was having big problems about 15 years before this, like in the
Hmm.
early 60s. That's why Cherie North was introduced to the studio system. But here
Right.
she
I
is,
forgot about that. I think I
53.
mentioned that on the breakout episode, I think.
Ah,
I don't know. I don't remember
so
5 minutes ago.
so I
What are we
think
doing?
Don Siegel is goofing on Cherie North by making her wear this house coat and slippers. But my question is, am I strange for having timed it to 8 minutes and 6 seconds, or is Don Siegel strange
I
for
think
having?
Don Siegel is
I
strange.
think that makes you perfect for this show.
Yeah, I think you're
I
perfect,
think both
John.
are true. Both things can be true.
Yeah.
Well,
I
No,
got a
I
frozen
felt like
screen
that
here.
scene went on way too long. I felt
yes.
like, I before that they'd already established where he would call somebody and then they'd cut and the action had
Mhm.
already happened. I feel like because it was Cherie North that maybe they went ahead and gave her that full 8 minutes, but I do feel like it was too long.
And did I did I miss the underground garage scene or is that after that?
It's later.
Yeah. And that was kind of exciting, but also kind of a little bit of a letdown. Like, don't you think? Like a little bit. Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
I love the underground. I love the underground garage scene.
I think he get shot and blown up some more cars, maybe.
Well, at this point, after we've left New Mexico where Cherie North has blown up some stuff, now we're starting to move into this part where they figure out what's going on. That's
Mhm.
there's a
Yes.
couple of scenes that come up, and I want both of y'all's perspective on this, but we cut back at this point we've settled into we've got these events happening and we're cutting between Bronson trying to figure out what's going on and Lee Remick, these various events happening, and then we're going back to Langley with our friend Tyne Daly, Miss
Right.
Putterman, and her bosses. So now we're back in Langley. Okay. This is when um, they figure out. Then this is kind of the end of Tyne Daly's part in the movie. But this is when they look at and they say, remember her boss, the guy that has been kind of, she's been kind of, leading along all along. He said,
Yeah.
he comes in, he says, what's the hometown match probability? And she feeds it in the computer and it's 41.8%.
Hmm.
Okay, the hometown match. Remember, these are these towns where these events are happening.
Right.
Okay. So and if you remember, Tyne Daly's kind of her last part in the movie is they figure out this 41% hometown match is happening.
Hmm.
The very next scene in the movie, Bronson and Lee Remick are walking along, and Lee Remick, okay, we've already discussed how the women in this movie are kind of, in a way, they've got the jokes, but they're also kind
Hmm.
of leading the men a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Lee Remick, Bronson's trying to figure out what's going on. Lee Remick suggests, "What is there anything? Is there anything interesting about the hometowns?" So
Hmm.
you've left Tyne Daly and
Right.
then figuring out this 42%, and then and that's where Bronson figures out. Wait a second, he's writing his name across the map.
Yes. Wow.
That's when you first realize there's this real connection between Lee Remick and what's going on in Langley. Because Tyne Daly figures it out, and in the very next scene, Lee Remick suggests to Bronson, "What about the hometowns?" That's when Bronson puts it together. I think that's a great. I had never noticed that.
Yeah.
You tell me if y'all have noticed this before, and I apologize if I
I
have.
did not notice that.
That's
That's
the
I did
first
really,
not
time I've
yeah.
either.
ever
That's
brought
all
that
you,
connection.
Brad.
Now I got to watch it again tonight at work. And they're really going to question what the hell's going on.
Had you noticed that before, John? Had you ever noticed that before?
I did not notice it. It's all
Mhm.
you. That's an amazing
Well,
catch,
there's two scenes
Brad.
back to back where that happens, and I'd
Sure.
never noticed that connection before. And it made me wonder, kind of based on what you find out later with Lee Remick and her double agent and all that kind of stuff, did they suggest her to tell that to him?
Hmm.
Interesting.
And you know what? Before we, I don't really have a lot of time left, but before we close it up, what was going on? There was no. Why was there no chemistry between him and Lee Remick? You had her character trying to come on to him, and like, is that a Bronson thing? Does Bronson not want to like play that game in movies? Or I mean, it's
Well, Bronson had a deal that he would not have romantic scenes unless his wife was there on the set, and
I
he would
see.
not take off his
I was
he would
wondering, as
not
I
take off
know,
his pants.
yeah.
And Jim Caviezel has the same thing, and I believe there's another actor. I won't even bother to name him, but yes, you're
Paulie
correct.
Shore.
That's the one.
Okay, because it was just seemed like why are they even bothering with this? Like her coming on to him, and then at the end, I don't want to jump to the end, but then at the end, we're supposed to believe that they kind of like run off together and just because they were a team, like all right,
Well, in the
now
source
we're going off into the
material in the
sunset
book,
together.
they're like 30-ish.
Hmm.
They're much younger, but here Bronson's 56 and she's 47,
Yeah.
and it doesn't quite work the same way.
Hmm.
But you're absolutely correct that in the book they were hot for each other in the
Yeah.
middle part of the book. So
Well, I've got a higher opinion of this movie than you, Eric. I'll just go ahead
Mhm.
and tell you.
I do. I love the
It's
movie. I
it's a
just,
movie that I
Mhm.
feel like is an underrated Bronson movie. I don't
I
think
agree
it
with you on
gets
that.
enough. I don't think it gets enough
Hmm.
attention for various things. But
Right.
I do agree that you know you have all this situation going on, and there's really no chemistry between them. Matter of
Right.
fact, every time she starts showing any interest, he'll like grab her by the face and threaten to kill her or something.
Yeah, he's
You
very
know, and
violent with her,
exactly. And so
which is kind of
whenever
hot.
they've made it back to Houston, they've made it back to Houston and they're and you talking about the underground garage and he's
Yeah.
about to go into the he's about to go into that awesome hotel. It's in Houston, but the hotel is in San Francisco. I mean, it's the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco. It's got these awesome elevators that were used like in Towering Inferno
Yes.
and
I did that was one thing I did want to mention, that beautiful hotel. It
right.
was very cool.
Oh, it's so awesome. And but you don't buy when she like grabs his arm and says, be
Hmm.
careful,
You
Greg."
don't buy it,
You
no.
don't buy that. I agree. I
I don't
do
buy
agree with
them
that.
together at all. But I
Mhm.
do agree with you that it's underrated, and I do think I do like it, and I feel like I I don't really know because it came out when I was two, and I haven't seen a lot in my research. When I did research, I seen that critics did not hate it. They got some good reviews, but I don't think it got a real great release, like video release. Like I remember it was hard to find in video stores for me when I was a kid. Um, and I remember waiting for it to come on TV. And I think to this day, my only thing I own is it filmed off of TV. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the DVD.
This was so cool when they
I bet it's
finally
beautiful
started.
on DVD. I bet
Look
it's
at that.
beautiful on
It's
Blu-ray.
gorgeous.
Yeah. It's a cool cover too, and I really need to find I think it was Paul Talbot put it on his thing. So my dad worked for Bell Telephone my whole life, and Pacific Bell had, or maybe it was Bell Telephone. They had an advertisement for Telefon. They were conjunct to get in cahoots with each other, promoting it. And I've been searching to find that ad again. It should be easy to find, but I can't find it. But I'll have to ask Paul when he comes on. He's coming on very soon to do White Buffalo, by the way. But can we jump to the end because I really have to go.
Sure.
Um,
I did want to point how bad hypnotized people drive, though.
they do drive poorly.
One
Yeah.
of my favorite scenes of the movie is down in that garage, and then we'll jump to the end. But remember when Martin Callender goes down those cool hotels and Bronson, it's one of the most exciting scenes of the film when
Hmm.
Bronson is trying to get down to that garage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one of the most cool scenes of Bronson, he jumps over a damn car
Hmm. That
in
was
that
cool.
garage.
That
That
was
is
cool.
so cool. But Martin Callender, he's trying to drive with his little case of explosive. He's like hitting the beams.
Hmm.
Eventually, he just runs into another car, and everything starts blowing up.
If you were Dal Chimsky, would you take a day off and just like make people act like chickens? Like just for fun, just for I mean, like he could have used. He was an intense dude. He was. I love. Let's talk about Donald Pleasance. A notorious overactor, but I love him. I love Donald Pleasance. Anybody else love Donald Pleasance? I
I
love his
love him in this
overacting.
movie. I love him in this
I
movie.
want Danny to watch this movie because I think Danny might like this one. It's a shame,
Yeah,
but
I'm definitely gonna queue it up. Now that I know where to find it, I'm gonna watch it when we're done here.
yeah, we might talk about it again. You
Well,
never
I
know.
would say on his character, though, I've wondered why at this point, because if you remember, right during this scene,
Hmm.
Lee Remick runs, she sees him out in front of the motel and they actually run into each other. She tries to stop him. I'm
Hmm.
surprised. Of course, it's a movie, but I'm surprised. It seems like he might have pulled back a little bit and thought, okay, I need to maybe revisit the way I'm going about this because it seems like people are on to me at this point.
Right.
Lee Remick has tried to stop him. She's run into him out in the street. They've literally had a car wreck, and yet he continues on with the same plan. I just feel
Hmm.
like maybe in real life he might have stopped, pulled back a little bit, and said, "Okay, let me maybe vary from my plan a little bit."
So their last stop in this film is at a really cool redneck Western bar, which I just love.
I would
Charles.
go there tonight if I could find the
Oh,
dugout.
me
If
too.
there was a dugout here in Central Arkansas, I'd be there tonight.
We had one here in Levittown, a bar called the Dugout when I was a kid. We used to go as kids, teenagers. They would have all ages bands shows on the weekend, but they would have it like no drinking in the basement, and we'd see like punk bands and stuff. And I remember Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. That guy showed up. The bus was bigger than the bar. What's his name? Rock
Rick
and
Derringer.
Roll Hoochie Coo.
Rick
Yeah, the
Derringer.
bus. Yeah, the bus was bigger than the bar.
Rick
But
Derringer.
yeah, they show up there. That was a cool joint. And the best part of the movie, breakout character. My favorite part of the movie is the snake. the rattlesnake that gets loose, and
That
is that
that's Doug, right? That's Doug. Isn't that the snake's name, Doug?
Yeah, Doug the snake, and he's it's a long, drawn out scene with that snake, and there's like a cowboy shooting at it.
Yeah.
But what makes that happen? Like what brings that on? John, you want to take that?
The two sheriffs were in there because they wanted to talk with Doug, who had been
Mm-hmm.
out fishing. So they're waiting to talk to him, and Charles Bronson gives Lee Remick the high sign to for a distraction, and she pushes over the snake aquarium.
That's
So
yeah.
the snakes get out, and then you have the two Texas sheriffs start shooting at the snake on the
Yeah,
floor, and it provides a great distraction for Charles Bronson to get into the phone booth where Galchimsky is trying
uh,
to set off these human time bombs and
yeah.
strangle him.
And he just strangles him. It's a cool kill. Like you were so used to Bronson shooting or blowing somebody up, he just strangles him, and that snake slithering. It's such a long scene, and it's almost like I feel like that scene's almost like David Lynch's. Like it's very like it's like the way it's filmed and that the colors in the bar and that like kind of weird hazy look of the camera. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's throughout the movie, but it really it's almost like surreal, like that scene. It just
Yeah,
goes on for, and it's just like, why do they keep shooting? It's a snake. Like, why doesn't somebody step on it? Like,
Right.
like what? Like, does that happen in Texas? Like, there's people in the bar and they're just shooting at this snake, and they
Right.
they finally hit it. And I wonder if they really shot a real snake because I don't think they cared much about that at that time.
I Googled that because I wrote down
Really?
myself. I wanted to know, and I couldn't get I got the answer I got was probably not. Probably it was
Yeah.
a camera trick or something like. And then that's what I hope to. I hope is.
Yeah.
But I did want to point out one thing about that
Hmm.
scene, and that has to do with the actor Roy Jensen, who played Doug
Yes.
Stark,
Roy
who has
Jensen.
been such a fixture in Bronson films.
Hmm.
But what I wanted to point out, we've talked about Roy Jensen, whether it be Breakout or, he's just, or Breakheart Pass. He's just been such
Yeah.
a fixture. But I personally, there's something about that scene that bothers me. And it's when they
Right.
go out and Bronson quotes the poem to him
Hmm.
and he has to kill him because
Yeah.
it sets him off. I've always,
Right.
from the very first time I watched that movie and watching it again today, getting ready for this, it's always bothered me that he says the poem to him. And
Hmm.
then, once you set him off, there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
He ends
So
up
like
having to kill him.
but I guess his character, I guess Grigori had to know for sure, I guess. Or maybe he just could not have him alive out there just in case.
I don't know. It's always bothered me
But it
because
wasn't his mission to kill all those people. It was
right.
his mission
Because
to
after
kill
that, they
Delchimsky.
they leave them alive after that. You know what I'm saying? They they
Mhm.
they they make a point of not wanting to set off these guys and ladies after that. And so John, I don't know if you have a theory about that, but that's always bothered me that he set him off there at the end.
yes, I think that Borsov, that Bronson's character needed to kill him. He couldn't let him go back into the dugout and have his wife and he match up their stories. And also Bronson, that Doug, Roy Jensen's character, is a Russian agent. He's from Russia.
Right.
He knows he's there for some Russian purpose. So
But we
so
just saw him as Roy Jensen, like this nice,
yeah.
like Texas hillbilly
He's
guy.
got him a
And
big
that's
old
what I see
trout.
him as. He was a stuntman before he was an actor. And so anyways,
Mhm.
that I think Bronson just has to tidy up things here. And also, this is what we pay the money to see Bronson do. And I'm
That's
very
true.
happy that
That
I
Roy
feel I got my
Jensen's
money's
dead.
worth.
Well, listen, guys, I actually have to work tonight. I gotta eat dinner. So he kills Chimsky. He strangles him in the telephone booth, which I guess is kind of like poetic justice. It's kind of, oh, he's killing him in the telephone or telephone booth.
Yeah.
And then they like kind of like she's supposed to kill Bronson
Right.
afterwards. We
I wanted to
forgot to
make sure
mention
you
that.
mentioned that. I did
We
want to make sure you
forgot to
mentioned
mention that
that.
earlier. And did you notice earlier in the movie, she thinks that he killed Delchimsky, and she goes to kill him with the orange juice,
The
but she
orange juice.
drops it.
That's right.
Yeah, but I thought that was sloppy work on her behalf, but like getting it all the poison ready in the orange juice because he like she didn't know if it was Delchimsky yet. So, but anyway, so she kind of calls and tells them basically she's not going to kill him, and they're in the wind, and now we're supposed to believe they're in love and take it off, and it's kind of a corny ending, and but all in all, a great film, a lot of fun. I love that time period. Like I said, I don't remember the mid to late 70s because I was a baby, but I remember the world looking like that, you know what I mean? So I don't know, I love that. Just the way Danny loves driving by something from the 90s or something. The same way
Very much.
Danny
Yeah.
feels when he drives by a
It's
Hot
like those,
Topic.
yeah, it's how
Right.
Taco Bell commercials make me feel.
Well, I'm going to want to hear what John's final words are, but
Yeah.
before I throw it to you, John, I'm going to give a couple of final words myself, and
Hmm.
a couple things. It's interesting that Bronson didn't insist Jill Ireland be in this part.
Hmm.
You know, Lee Remick's amazing. I think she's amazing. I just find it interesting. This seems like Bronson might have insisted Jill Ireland be in this part, but he didn't, and so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
Another
I was
thing
wondering about that too. I kind of thought maybe the director didn't want that or something.
that Bronson at that time though had the power, he probably could have insisted, but
Yeah.
I just don't know. I think there's a story there
Hmm.
somewhere I'd love to hear. And
We'll have
then
to ask Paul when he's on. He might know.
yeah, yeah, and then the other thing, like you said, the corny ending at the end. They have miles to go before I sleep, and
Hmm.
there at the end is well, how many miles? Well, it's 10 hours. It's 10 miles to the happy hour motel. I always thought that was kind of funny at the end that they're going to
Yeah.
go 10 more miles to the happy hour
Yeah,
motel
they're gonna
after
go to
all
like
of this.
they're gonna go to one of them pay by the hour joints. John C, any last words? Not last
I,
words. I mean,
I
well,
just wanted
hopefully you'll
to,
be back again.
yeah, just wrap up the Lee Remick and the bringing Charles Bronson the orange juice.
Hmm.
This was in 1977, and the trope of oranges indicating death came in 1972 from the Godfather movie. So
Oh
this is
yeah.
following on where she had a bowl of oranges, and you might remember that earlier in the movie, she had tried to offer Charles Bronson an apple. When he
Right,
rejected him,
right.
she grabs the oranges, squeezes him a glass of orange juice. She puts the packet of powder from that poison, the cyanide tablet that Delchimsky eventually died from,
Hmm.
and Shireen North used the cyanide tablet to kill her own self. So, so when she dropped the glass, she dropped it on purpose because she realized that Charles Bronson was not a threat to
Right.
her or to the United States.
Hmm.
I thought that was a great little bit of writing. And Sterling Silliphant was brought in at the last minute to clean up Peter Hyam's script. And this is my own thought, is Peter Hyam's role a script that would cost too much money to
Yeah,
make. And
probably.
Sterling Silliphant he's written over 700 hours of television
Hmm.
programming. So he knows how to make things inexpensive. I'm thinking of things like those rings. By the way, it was an MGM production, and a lot of the stuff was the interiors were filmed right there at the MGM studios in Culver City. So even things like those rings were probably in the prop department.
Right.
And, so it was done. And just like when they said, "Oh, we have to charter a jet," well, all they did was use this private jet interior where they could have their dialogue. So, so wrapping up the movie is what Sterling Silliphant is called in to do, and do it
Nice.
cheaply. So I thought that was great.
Number 8, will you come back on the show again?
I would love to. You guys are
We'd
Awesome.
love to have
fantastic
you,
Hey, well, I'm
John.
glad we finally were able to make it happen, and I gotta bounce. But you've been listening to This Week in Charles Bronson, the highly uncalled for news and pop culture program that revolves around this wonderful community of gentlemen.